for the people listening who want to become music supervisors, what do you recommend they do and how do they break in?
Gotta get a mentor, someone to work with. That's what I did early on. I started in the music business way before I switched to music supervision, worked at record companies and publishing companies and management companies. And, I had a mentor early on that I worked for. And then, when I switched to music supervision, I also recommend, like I always say this, there are no stupid questions. There just aren't, because, everyone has questions. Like you said, you're constantly learning. I'm constantly learning. It keeps kind of a humble playing field in what we do. None of us know everything. And, but to get under someone and just learn from that, that's what I recommend.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business. The book, 3rd edition, is out now everywhere. Hardcover, ebook, audiobook, however you like to consume books, you can find the book where you find books. Today, my guest is Deva Anderson. She is an award-winning music supervisor and executive, and she has worked on over 40 feature films, over 30 original series for television. She's currently on staff as the in-house music supervisor at Tom Hanks' production company, Playtone, and she's been with them for 25 years, going back all the way to That Thing You Do, one of my favorite movies, all the way up to Masters of the Air, which is the new show on Apple TV, and we talk a bit about that. This episode, we talk a lot about what a music supervisor does, and longtime listeners know that I've had quite a few music supervisors on the show. I love talking about this because sync licensing is one of these elusive yet very lucrative parts of the industry that it seems all artists want to tap into. And so to try to gather as many gems from those gatekeepers as we can, I have music supervisors on the show. Now, for those of you that don't know what a music supervisor is or how music gets placed in film or TV or any of that kind of stuff, don't worry, we get into it, and Deva does a great job breaking it down and how all that works and how she prefers to find music, place music, clear music, all of that stuff. We had a great conversation. And then for those of you who are listening that want to become music supervisors, I asked her at towards the end of the episode what it takes for somebody and how to go about that. And she gives a really great answer that if you want to become a music supervisor, definitely stick around for her answer on that. Check out the show that we're talking about, Masters of the Air. It's on Apple TV now, Apple Plus, I guess, or whatever they're calling it. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads, all of that stuff. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. Visit aristake.com and get on the email list. That's where you're going to get the most relevant, up-to-date information about the new music business. aristake.com, sign up for the email list. We'll ping you on new episodes, but more importantly, just send you other resources that's helpful for the industry. But if you can, right now, just pause this episode, give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, pop a comment there. I love reading the comments, or you can even head over to YouTube and leave a comment on this episode, give us a thumbs up, all that stuff. And then hit subscribe, hit the follow button so we show up in your feed. All right, let's kick into the show. Deva Anderson, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
So we've had quite a few music supervisors on the program. Our audience loves the work of music supervisors. You're like kind of this field that is this like elusive kind of friendly gatekeeper community that has just the best taste in music in the entire industry. And it seems like kind of this fanciful fantasy land that you operate in. And I don't think most people that aren't really ingrained in the sync world really understand as much what music supervisors do. So let's just zoom way out and start very basically. What does a music supervisor do?
It's a great question. I love how you cover these questions too, Ari, because it was completely in another zone before I started doing it many years ago.
Yeah.
So I always wish people did explain what it was. So you had to jump into the fire. What I try to say just briefly is music supervisors involved anything musical that you see in whatever media format you're supervising, whether it be film, TV, ad, short form, etc., from soup to nuts. So beginning script phases all the way to production. So it is basically music supervisor usually has their hands on, involved creatively, often legally and licensing anything in the script that you could flag that is a character singing or on the radio, in addition to all of the music and post-production. And it's working with the director and helping the director and or producer showrunner kind of help them thread out their vision and make it come to life. We're the messengers in that. And creative collaborators. And then one caveat I'll say, we do everything musically outside of physically composing.
Right. And I was going to ask about that because most movies and TV shows will also have a composer. Now, talk to me how you work with the other musical people on a production, like a composer, and how that relationship works.
Yeah, each project is different. That's what makes it so fun still after doing it, after, a few decades, is a lot of times directors, showrunners, or producers will come in already having an idea or a previous relationship with a composer on. So if there already is that creative connection between a composer and a director, they're often already running and having conversations at the same time that I'm talking to them about the song vision. And then there are times, and so they have their own relationship. And then as a music supervisor, I can be involved in that and spotting sessions, etc. And the conduit with helping communicate studio needs, etc. There are times which are, I find, the most fun when a director comes in, does not have an idea of a composer, and can be very specific in what they want or very open. And that's when, as music supervisors, I find it the most fun to start from just ground zero in suggesting people, working with people, and bringing that to we start by suggestions and sending reels and setting up meetings. And oftentimes what they think they want is very different from what we end up with.
Interesting. You mentioned spotting session. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So usually as music supervisors, we're involved in the beginning stages and the composer comes on a little later.
Okay.
We're involved in all the production. The composer sometimes will be involved during production phases if there's on cameras that they are going to be involved in, sometimes like a classical component, or if a composer is the one we work with who's going to do a piano theme early on if a character is playing the piano, for example. But
so spotting, is that just what does spotting mean?
Spotting means there is a time, it's usually after the film is shot, when the composer will sit down, and I'm always present there too, and the film editor, and we go through the entire film in its early iteration, which would be sometimes during the director's cut or before that.
Okay.
And we go through scene by scene and talk about specifically what type of score that the composer is going to embark on and writing demos.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you oftentimes come in on the script phase and you're there through the whole process. Now, is it typical? You said that directors oftentimes will work with composers they love, and so they might be there from early on or something, like Spielberg and John Williams or something like that. But when it comes to the point of like the script phase, what are you getting from a script that is going to inform your vision for what kind of the sonic palette will be for the production?
That's a good question. From the script, often, if there are songs that are scripted in, it's two
Okay.
missions, basically.
Okay.
Creatively and also budgetarily, because we're
Okay.
usually involved in negotiating those songs, and production often accounts for that and does not. So we're involved in the overall music budget too, of keeping everything in line from the
Mm.
beginning. Um, and also, oftentimes in a script, there will be a very expensive song that is scripted in
Mm-hmm.
that is not affordable or not achievable for an approval or time-wise, etc. And
Uh-huh.
we're always there to basically come up with alternative choices creatively and budgetarily to make that work before shooting.
Got it. And I noticed, right, in the script, if it calls for, like you mentioned, a character singing, for
Hmm.
instance, like Masters of the Air, saw in the first episode, there's a bar scene where it's
Hmm.
actually written into the script where he's singing and they're drunk and they're playing a game. So was that song actually written into the script? I was like, okay, this character is going to be singing this song, and then you had to kind of go out to the publishers, see if you could clear that song, or was that like character's gonna sing a song, you choose, we'll figure it out?
Yeah, for Masters of the Air, because one of the most important uh, things for us at Playtone and also for all of our World War II and period pieces is to make
Mm-hmm.
sure it's historically accurate. So
Mm-hmm.
the screenwriters were very, very well versed in during screenwriting on what type of music, if it was scripted in, and the reason why, and the reason during World War II why those were in there.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times too, it can be very tricky with the period pieces because some things that you think are public domain are not public domain, and there are copyrights of arrangements. So oftentimes we work with musicologists in tandem to do those
Mm-hmm.
kind of searches to make sure that legally everything is cleared.
That's great. And yeah, because I there are moments like in the bar scene where the character talks about going to choose music from the jukebox, and like
Hmm.
maybe like Artie Shaw or Benny Goodman or something like that, and
Hmm.
then we hear Artie Shaw playing out of the jukebox. Was that kind of like they give you two options, like, all right, which can you clear? We're gonna either get Artie or Benny Goodman here, and we'll see which is clearable.
Well, that one actually we did decide in post, and that was
Okay.
something and for Masters of the Air, my associate Rachel Latzenheiser and I co music supervised that, and that was really a fun one to dig into creatively because it was
Mm-hmm.
so early on. It was one of the first scenes to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what song would be the intro to that, and it
Right.
also because Masters of the Air obviously takes place World War II, and the majority of it is during wartime. So it was one
Mm-hmm.
of the more joyful memories before they went off,
Mm,
and so it was a really poignant song.
mm,
Even though it played, as the background on the jukebox, etc., it really does set the tone. So sometimes there
mm-hmm.
are music placements of songs that seem very small and very subliminal, but they do really make a tremendous impact when you're watching the whole series as a whole.
Yeah, and even when they were overseas, and they're kind of in a bar, and you kind of
Mhm.
hear that. I don't know if it was the same artist. I didn't have my Shazam going at that time, but it's kind of like that early big band era throwback. You could tell is like, oh,
Mhm.
this is American music here that is playing now overseas, and there's kind of a nod where you kind of reference it, even if you're not paying attention, I guess intentionally, subliminally. It's like, oh yeah, it's just kind of like that bar that was back home, and they're passing the photo around of the women that they have back home, and it's kind of like bringing those memories into that as well.
Absolutely. I mean,
Hmm.
that is one thing that was really important about the songs because in this in particular, they were daily, getting back into the plane and putting themselves not only in harm's way, but the chance of survival every time was
Hmm.
very, very low. So
Hmm.
anything, as we all know, I mean, the reason why we're all in the business is how music affects us when we hear something and
Yep.
the hearkening back to something home, it's like the same thing as a home cooked meal. It's like a smell or a
Mm.
sound is
Mm.
some of our biggest memory senses.
Hmm.
And it's one of the only things that we could translate through sonically in a series like that, that really helps people connect with the will to go on.
Yeah, no, that's really well put. And it brings levity. I mean, the score is so dramatic.
Mm,
I mean, and Blake Neely did an incredible job with the score,
amazing.
but it's heavy,
Hmm.
whereas when the music, I guess the needle drop music, kind of the jukebox music is playing, that juxtaposed with this gigantic score. It's so cinematic, and it sounds like a full orchestra is kind of playing
Hmm.
this. It's really this dynamic juxtaposition, kind of just bringing the levity across the board.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, Blake Neely, who I will definitely, I mean, he's the musical star of the series,
Hmm.
honestly.
Hmm.
He has worked with us at Playtone on several other series and
Hmm.
also all of our CNN Decade series here too. And
Ah.
he's incredible talent. And that's an example where he and um, one of our head producers here, Gary Getzman, have a synergy of
Hmm.
how to talk about the score that that goes beyond any kind of synergy. Like you mentioned, obviously the longtime composers who have relationships with directors or
Hmm.
producers. That's one of the relationships there. So,
Hmm.
and it was very, very clear they wanted a big orchestral score to
Hmm.
underscore, what we were seeing visually.
Absolutely. So for this production, which takes place, like you said, World War II, we're talking
Hmm.
1943 or so, I believe is the time period. Now, that and you referenced public domain
Hmm.
early on. I remind us, if you know,
Sure.
how public domain works and how that works with your job, and what that really means.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that um, I wish someone explained to me like 20 years ago or so.
Yeah.
You have to learn trial by fire. I mean, I
Uh-huh.
know that you've interviewed a lot of my compadres, and
Hmm.
we all say like, there wasn't a book of how to do it when we started doing it. So you kind of jump in and learn. So public domain means that it means different in different countries. And there's a certain amount of time period after the lyricist and the writer of the music um, their date of death. So,
Okay.
sometimes it's 70 plus years, 100 plus years, but it's different worldwide, for example.
Okay.
So, for all the things that we do work on, we do need usually all worldwide rights. So, even though something can fall into the public domain in which basically there's no copyright holder after a
Sure.
certain amount of times that the songwriter, if there are lyrics, it's the lyricist and the writer of the music
Hmm.
um, past their date of death. So, for example, like Happy Birthday, that was copywritten for many, many years, Warner Chappell. And then when the estate was handling it and the writers of the song, there was enough years that went by that it fell into the public domain. And so Warner Chappell basically, they didn't lose the rights, but they couldn't license it anymore, and
Mm.
anyone can use it in film and TV. Now, prior to that, you would have to license Happy Birthday through Warner Chappell. Happy for those whoever is collecting those royalties on the estates.
I mean, that must have been pretty recently, because it did stick out to me, growing up watching movies where they'd be bringing out a birthday cake and they'd be singing for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow." I'm like,
yes.
Come on, what are you doing here? Not singing that, but now it makes sense. It's like, it was too expensive or something to actually be able to sing that. But I'm seeing it a lot more now where they're actually singing "Happy Birthday" because I guess it expired.
It did.
Okay, that makes sense. But now you talked about the lyricist and the composer, but my educated listeners will know that there's another copyright that's involved with this, and that's the recording copyright.
Right.
And how does that
Very
work
different
in terms of public domain?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because recording rights, in my experience, it usually is only on the publishing that you could trace it this way. Okay. There are times that recording rights do fall under, but it's very, very rare.
Right.
And sometimes it's overseas recordings, etc. But that definitely is when we pull in a musicologist to do a report with us, and we kind of compare notes on that.
Gotcha.
So recording rights are usually, in all the projects I've worked on, I don't think that I've even flagged anything that has fallen into the public domain that has been a master recording.
So really when something... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, one more thing I'll say, classical compositions, those are always, you assume, of course, like Bach, Beethoven, etc.
Right.
But there are some which are only on the publishing side. And then, as music supervisors, there's lots of libraries we go to where we can find inexpensive master recordings of Bach or Beethoven or classical to license those at a nominal fee. And the publishing would be on the public domain side. However, there are instances like Puccini, for example, where maybe the music falls under public domain, but the lyricist to the opera, the writer, it does not. So I do remember working on a film a number of years ago where we assumed it was and it wasn't. So, you never ever assume that all classical compositions are in the public domain.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think that should just be the takeaway tagline, is never ever assume, period. And that's probably your line of work where you really have to do that due diligence. And I wouldn't even thought of that as just like, okay, Puccini's the composer, but there's a separate lyricist whose date of death is different, and it comes. But it's fascinating. And just to kind of reiterate what you just said about the composition might be in public domain, but you found because with all classical compositions, we're going to see various recordings from various different orchestras around the world, and maybe the Chicago Symphony Orchestra or the LA Phil recording or something like that. That's going to be really expensive. But maybe we have, I don't know, the Miami Orchestra or a community orchestra, or just, just like an independent community group that puts a recording out that sounds amazing, and they would license it. And they're all going to be different fees for that recording. And then if the compositions on the public domain, you don't need to clear that side, but you still need to go in and clear and license and pay for the recording.
Right. Yeah. And usually it gets a little wonky in the US. There can be community recordings that are non-union members, but if something is recorded union, there are all these different tiers of payments that need to be done. So usually, as music supervisors, we'll be able to find like thousands of classical recordings that are usually recorded overseas, non-union, and very, very well done. And there's a huge, variety out there that we pull from for that.
Right. I didn't even think about that, because if you're using music, there are instances, I imagine, where the unions come into play, where the musicians could theoretically make residuals for performing on that recorded piece of music. Is that and I've only really known this for singers that may get like brought in to sing the theme song for a TV show where it is a work for hire. It's not their original song, and it's not their original recording. They're kind of brought in, and then they actually make kind of SAG after royalty residuals because they're now a performer on the show essentially, and they're a singer. But I didn't realize that it worked with instrumentalists too on licensed music. Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
cool,
and definitely falls under a lot of classical. Anyway,
that
big
makes
tangent.
sense.
I don't know if that's helpful for any.
No, this is helpful, and I'm so interested in this, and it's very fascinating. I love learning. So tell me about kind of this show, Masters of the Air, is one where, of course, you're using music that came out prior to when it's taking place because it's historically accurate, or at least it's attempted to be as historically accurate as possible. When you're working on a production where you're able to use new music, what is your process and approach for how you find and obtain music, and your preference really when it comes to working with major publishers and labels, independent artists, sync agents, all of that?
It's, probably similar to what you've heard from a lot of music supervisors. Representation is important for us to consider artists and songwriters. There are too many other loopholes that come through if a pure independent release comes our way. So it's usually best. There's lots and lots of sync agents that we work with that are also really proactive in finding a lot of independent music. Or unreleased, unrepresented, etc. So usually we will go through publishing and master reps, etc., and sync agencies, managers a lot of times. But our research really does span. It's not like we're not poking around and finding lots of new music. And, between Rachel and I too, we go to a lot of shows and are out there and working with the reps on stuff that's upcoming. So primarily it does get funneled through by a rep, though.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I kind of go back to the early days of the Hotel Cafe, and I kind of hear it's like it's in the mythology now and the lore of that venue here in LA, where it's just like, in the early 2000s, all the music supervisors were piling into the small room, or the only room at the time at the Hotel Cafe, and hearing all of the music. And then the following week, you'd hear the song placed on Grey's Anatomy because Alexander Patsavas was there and saw the song and oh, this is great. And then the week later it would be on Scrubs, and it was this era, this kind of, I as a singer-songwriter looked at this was the golden era of kind of sync licensing, because it was also so many independent artists, which was this turning point. And I give Alexander Patsavas kind of a credit for kind of breaking open this independent, highlighting independent music initially kind of with the OC. Then, of course, with Grey's Anatomy. But it was something where, I don't think many independent artists ever felt like they had a shot getting their music placed until we saw shows like the OC or Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs. And it was oh, wow, there are shows that are placing independent music. And that's something that a lot of indie artists still these days, they hear about sync, but then they're but now have the walls come way back up, and is it gatekeep decades ago where you need a publisher and need a label and we don't have a shot? Or do you say that kind of indie artists are still being placed?
Well, it's also different in this time because a lot more is available, right? And so there are lots of different ways to access people. So, and new music. The unfortunate thing is, because of how the music business has changed, and there were actually more sync reps during that time too, and some publishers, but now with the monopoly of publishers kind of going under one publisher that used to have like all these other publishers used to have their own reps.
Yeah.
So it's a matter, so that's where we do try to be really proactive in finding things, because it's just a matter of like what can be covered. And it's impossible to find everything out there.
Sure.
There's so many great artists and new things. But in terms of when we're delivering shows to whether it be to Netflix or Apple or to the studios or to New Line or, those types of things, we have to make sure that legally there isn't a random songwriter who was in the room who's not credited, who's going to come later, And usually through reps, that's already signed, sealed, and delivered and vetted.
That's a really good point. And I do want to emphasize this because a lot of artists think that they should just hit you up and send their music directly to music supervisors. But they're like, yeah, I have the rights. I put my song on Spotify. I have the rights, don't I? And like you said, like legally is such a big part of your job to clear everything. And so I'm gathering that you prefer working with reps because they understand how the business works, how the legally how all of this works, and they know how to clear it, and now they have a reputation with you where you can trust them that everything is cleared. Whereas like you may love an artist or may love a piece of music, but that artist just may not understand how the business works. And like you said, there might be an extra songwriter in the room, or maybe they used a sample or something. They don't realize they couldn't use a sample or any of that. And so like that's just another layer of protection, I guess, working with the reps.
Definitely. You said it perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about kind of some of these other projects. So I know, Masters of the Air is part of Tom Hanks' production company, Playtone. And I know you've worked on a bunch of other productions there, but what else are you working? Because I know music supervisors typically are freelancers. I'm assuming, is your relationship with Playtone, are you kind of on staff, or are you still similarly like a freelancer?
Yeah, that's I'm super grateful. I've been part of the Playtone family since its inception. So I am in-house here, and basically the in-house head of music supervisor, whatever you call it. No one really has any titles anymore. But I started with them when Tom directed his first directorial and That Thing You Do, which was quite a long time ago. And that was a huge music movie. And Gary Getzman, who co-runs a company with him, is one of the foremost, and he's probably the most well-versed musical film producer out there. And he used to produce lots of, all of Jonathan Demme's Stop Making Sense and Something Wild, and also used to produce records too. So he's one of the few movie producers who also really understands music. And they, when they decided to open up Playtone, they brought me in-house because they're such music lovers. So I've been here ever since, and they've always welcomed me to have my own company. So I have my own music supervision company, and I music supervise a lot of projects outside of Playtone too.
Awesome.
So it's a large variety that I work on, everything from comedies, like we did My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 here, and I just finished the piano lesson, which is for Netflix, and that's outside of here. And I also get hired by other studios and do consulting. I consulted for Netflix for, 2019 through 22, where I was kind of in de facto in-house exec there, music on the music. And when they needed it during the pandemic, it was super busy, but I still, am in-house at Playtone. So I wear a lot of hats.
Cool. Talk to me about Netflix a little bit, or even just the streaming networks. I mean, what are you seeing, or how has it shifted in terms of the budgets and I guess for the various shows on Netflix and primarily I'm talking about for kind of the indie artists. I know that if you're looking to place a Beyonce song or something like that, you're going to have to pay a lot for that. But like, what is a kind of we're seeing these days is typical upfront fees that are being offered for songs?
I think you'd probably have to ask them directly because they could speak to it more specifically on what the tiers are for the projects that for example, piano lesson. It was mid-sized budget, but the budgets overall, they really kind of range, I think. And the content has changed. I mean, we're all viewers ourselves, so we can really see that what's available content-wise and taste-wise has changed on all the streamers. And, during the pandemic, that was a really rare time where it was like everyone was home and all they were doing was watching streaming. So there was just a front load of so much content out there. And, the budgets were very different then than they are now, and the choices of what they decide to put out. But to be specific on that, I would definitely have someone, from the
but I'm
actual
curious,
streamers.
like, what are you, maybe not even specific to Netflix, but I think it's helpful for like a ballpark for TV shows, on. Is there a difference between like a Netflix or an Apple or a Max versus like a CBS or an NBC primetime TV show? Are we seeing still the upfront sync fees are similar? Are streamers a lot more? Primetime broadcast television a lot more or less?
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Like, are there comparisons?
Yeah.
I actually, on the projects I worked on, like I worked on the Disney Hulu series Alaska Daily with Hilary Swank, and that was Tom McCarthy's series. And we used a lot of contemporary music and also a lot of indigenous music that were from Alaska and Iceland and all around there. It was super cool and fun to use indigenous music from there, like contemporary indigenous music. And the fees very much mirrored where sometimes other streamers would. I think that you've also put it out there on all the things that you publish, Ari, and things of the ranges. I think it can really be a wide range.
Yeah. Right. And I one of the reasons why I'm asking you is because I want to stay accurate. Accurate on the resources that I provide. Because, artists are kind of like, it's one thing to have anecdotally from, artists or managers or whatever, even some sync agents. There's like, oh yeah, I just got $5,000 for this placement on this Hulu TV show or something like that. I'm like, cool. Is that typical? Is that low? Is that high? Are we seeing that? Is that average? And then I'm just like, yeah, people are like, oh, I got 15 or I don't know.
Well, it always depends on the budget of the show, right?
Okay.
So the budget of the show really determines what the fees are. So,
Gotcha.
What you're going to see on a Marvel show is going to be different from like an indie show that the budget itself of the entire production. So it usually is compared to that. And that's why the fees are so all over the place. So something that is a $10 million, more indie mid-size versus a $50 million production, the fees are going to change.
That makes sense. And another reason for, artists listening to this, why it's kind of helpful to have that representation, because they're seeing all of it and they know kind of how to negotiate and help that. Whereas like, an artist or even a manager that's kind of going in blind and they're like, all right, we're getting, we can offer you $3,000 for this. And you're like, wait, but this is a Marvel film. Like, I think we can go higher. Like, we know, thinking about budgets in that realm or something like that and negotiating.
Well, the other thing is, what's the use, right? I mean, you probably explained this over and over because there are different uses in a show. So if it is a car radio drive-by that's for 3 seconds, that's going to be a small fee. If it's a visual vocal where there's a main character in the club on stage singing the entire song, it's going to be a higher fee. If something is in the end title, main title and end title, primarily always higher. fee wise. So
Makes
there's
sense.
so many variables that determine that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You know what bugs me in the streaming era? I love credits. I'm the dork who sits in the movie theater and watches the credits till the very end. And my wife's always like, "Come on, like, what are you gonna be the last one in here?" You know, I was like, "Yeah," but I just like, I don't know, I love that, and I always, when I was growing up, I would sit and wait because the music was always last, and so I'd always wait till the very end of the credits of a film to like see all the songs, you know, and to get all the info on all the songs that were used and who they performed and who wrote the songs and all of that. But in the streaming era, you got 5 seconds before it clicks to the next one, and we're missing all the credits. And I like that super bugs me. But I'm curious, like end credits, end titles used to be such like the song was going to be massive because that's playing and everything. But now we're not even hearing the end credit song. Is that being reflective in the discussions that you have when you work on stuff or in the budgets? It's like, yeah, well, no one's going to hear this anyways because it's going to go 5 seconds later. Or is there still weight to it, even though the realities are most people are consuming it where it's going to skip after 5 seconds?
There's usually always weight for the filmmakers, and it is discussed with streamers when we're plotting out what we're doing. It doesn't necessarily reflect it in the budget because even though on a streamer, we're not going to see the credits, oftentimes a lot of those features will have a mainstream in theaters run. So, or at festivals, etc., where the credits are seen. So the fees are usually the same, but the gravitas of what it means to have a song and end credit does change.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the coolest experiences I've ever had as an artist was I had one of my songs as an end credits during the end credits during a film, indie film. But, you know, I went to the premiere and I'm sitting in the movie theater and it just like comes through and it was great because there's no dialogue or anything happening.
Right.
It's just the thing scrolling and like I've never heard my music like that before. And that was so cool. So it's still like very exciting to have that. And right, we're thinking kind of festival, theaters, all of that. You know, even so, yeah. But so I'm curious something. I've never asked anyone this before, but I have been asked this. Does music ever change from an initial run on a certain streaming service or a certain initial broadcast, and then when it's licensed to another streaming service, does the music ever change in the production or during the show or anything like that, the film?
I can't answer when it switches streaming services.
Okay.
But there are
or just in
incidents
general. Yeah.
in general, like
from a theater run to at home or something like that.
No, because like nowadays we cover clearing it knowing where it's going to go, right?
Okay.
But previous to this, for example, there was that series, the Bruce Willis, Sybil Shepherd series called Moonlighting, in which no one knew when they were clearing music for that or making that it was going to be such a humongo hit. And so when they ended up re-putting it out on other services just recently, there was a problem with how the music was cleared and it didn't cover what we have nowadays, which are streaming services everywhere. So like there are incidences like that either the music needs to be re-cleared for those purposes, but nowadays, God forbid, things are not covered where it doesn't cover like all media here and after, like from here to Timbuktu, you know?
Yeah.
And all of the ongoing future technologies that are going to swallow us up.
Right. Or the AI, the robots are coming and they're just going to be. Well, and like let's talk AI for a second and just like Well, first off, do you ever use library music in your productions? And for
Yeah.
people that don't know what library music is, it is, well, maybe explain what library music is.
Um, Library music it has a bad name, but it's really great. And there's lots of different resources out there. Usually they're in-house music libraries that have 100% cleared copyrights on the sync and the master side with all types of genres. Classical, for example, and all types of genres, basically, where we can go. And we know that whatever is sourced there is 100% cleared and usually at a low price. So we do source that when we are trying to save money on productions or the music union issues that I was referring to in classical music.
Got it. Right. So, I know a lot of artists sometimes have their music in libraries, and it's kind of this numbers game where you're not really going for the big, $50,000 placement in the next big Marvel film or whatever, but you might get $2,500 placements or something like that because it's just a numbers game, and you can get a lot more if you're in the library for what supervisors are searching for. But also, I know they have in-house composers. I know they have like in-house producers that just kind of pump out a lot of music that, is just like production music. It's kind of, the library music. Have you found, or do you think that AI is going to affect that at all? Or have you experimented with AI music creation tools, or has productions that of experimented with that, where it's like, well, you know what, instead of paying $500 for this library placement, why not pay $20 a month for this AI music creation tool, and it works just fine for what we were looking for?
I personally haven't incorporated in the productions that I'm using now. However, it's so useful in other ways. But in productions, I will say, in a production I did recently finish where it's been incredibly helpful is in the final mix of the film, the sound mix, which is all effects, dialogue, and music is mixed in for the final mix of the film. And there are a lot of times, for example, where if there is, how do I describe this? Okay, if there is a performance piece on set where there's a band playing, for example. And there are specific ways. That's another thing we do as music supervisors to make sure technically on set that everything is either pre-recorded, or if there is a live recording of a band on stage or a character on stage, there are a lot of technical specifications that need to be created in the moment in order for us to utilize those tracks on the mix stage later. So there are times where creativity gets a flow, and even though we have pre-recorded a track from someone singing back to the track on stage, for example, the filmmakers can get caught up in the moment and they want to take some live takes, right? And we're not set up for live takes. So at that time, if it's mic'd properly, et cetera, you could do the live takes. And then if they fall in love with that in editorial, you don't have the split tracks or the stems to be able to really mix it well. There are AI tools now that can take those full tracks and split out the vocals, split out the bass, split out, the guitar, split out the drums. And we didn't have that on the mix stage before. So things like that are incredibly valuable.
I just used one the other day because our sync agent for an artist I manage, they asked us for the instrumental of this recording that the artist self-produced and couldn't find, like, never exported the instrumental and just couldn't find it, and like we didn't have it, and like they wanted it, and so I used one of the, shout out to Audio Shake. I went in there and I just like said, get me the instrumental, and it was like very surprising how well it did. It just like removed the vocals and it had the instrumental. I was like, wow, like it's not, I mean, I could tell this, it wasn't perfect,
right?
But like if it's in the background, or if it's just needed for like the final editor to kind of go through and just splice it together a little bit, or just like remove the vocals for this like one little moment because there's dialogue, like it'll do the trick for sure.
Yeah.
Which services do you use? Do you prefer, or do you like?
It's nothing that I used. It's our head mixer on the stage that I was having a conversation with. Yeah.
Yeah. Disco also has their own new STEM creation program. Shout out to Disco as well. And that's new. So any tracks there, you can just kind of click a button and you get full stems, which is wild. I mean, like, so, and that is a good, like, you know, we're constantly exploring AI, and there, you know, AI gets, a bad rap, at times. But at other times it's like, it can be used as a tool. And I think, you know, we're in this stage where it's just like, all right, how are we using it? Is it ethical? Is it going to be helpful? And like, speaking of Audio Shake, you know, just not to get too into the weeds or too nerdy, but like, I know so Audio Shake actually, paid a music library, for the rights to train their, algorithms on that music, and then they only trained it on kind of cleared music, and then that library paid the musicians and producers and composers that kind of had their music used for training purposes, which is the ethical way to go about this. And where it becomes challenging is when a lot of these AI programs are training on IP that they didn't clear, they don't own, they don't, and of course we know all the big AI, large language models, they trained on the whole internet that they didn't clear, and that's why they're being sued by like book publishers and soon probably the music industry. But so yeah, it's a weird frontier right now, and but that is a really interesting use case, and I think that's a super helpful tool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Nice. So tell me what's next. You have you said what's the Netflix one that you have coming out? The Pianist?
It's called The Piano Lesson. It's based on the Broadway play, the August Wilson play, and it's directed by Malcolm Washington. And it's just a beautiful, incredible story. Nice. And that's a period project too. And that's we're currently just finishing up on,
the period
on
gal.
Netflix. I mean, I do love those types of things, but I also totally love digging into utilizing all the fabulous new music that we get, every hour.
Yeah, sure. So, with your own production company, your own music supervision company, do you bring on other music supervisors to kind of, and then do you kind of, are you part of their company that you can kind of then staff different productions, or is it still you're the music supervisor on all the projects that a studio
for my own
for?
Company? I'm the music supervisor, and then I mentioned Rachel Latzenhauser, who's been with me for about 9 years now. So we will tag team and co-supervise most of the projects that we're doing together. And then the only other way that I diversify is if I'm a consultant for studios, which I have done. So that's, I love doing that too. It's just digging in, and it's what I do love about our job is it's never the same thing on each project. And the most important thing is just creative collaboration with the people and working with directors and producers, and there's a certain camaraderie with being a part of the music team for a film or show that there's nothing like it. It's just there's so much joy that goes into it still for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good to hear. For the people listening who want to become music supervisors, what do you recommend they do, and how do they break in?
Gotta get a mentor, someone to work with. That's what I did early on.
Mm,
I started in the music business way before I switched to music supervision, worked at record companies and publishing companies and management companies. And I had a mentor early on that I worked for. And then, when I switched to music supervision, I also recommend, like I always say this, there are no stupid questions. There just aren't. Like, because, everyone has questions. Like you said, you're constantly learning. I'm constantly learning.
hmm
It keeps kind of a humble playing field in what we do. None of us know everything. And but to get under someone and just learn from that, that's what I
hmm
recommend.
Awesome. Well, Deva, this has been so helpful and illuminating and exciting to hear everything you're working on.
Thanks, sorry.
I know people really appreciate kind of the wisdom that you've brought and the transparency. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
To make it in the new music business, it's a broad question.
Yeah,
um,
take it however you want.
I think I actually to continue. It's kind of what I just said. To continue to approach this with constantly questioning and constantly um, inquiring, because I feel like I just answered it previously, because um, it is also about trying new things. And
hmm
there's so much changing right now, like what we were just talking about with AI, that it's really, really important to dive in to lots of different areas, even if you think that type of area is not of interest, because it's changing every day at lightning speed.
hmm Cool. All right, Deva Anderson, thank you so much. That's great.
Thanks. Sorry. It was really great to connect with you. It was fun today. Thank you.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids, with music by Grassroots District, and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.